to this episode of Giving Your Dog Its Best Life. I'm Jeannine Smith, Canine Educator. We all love our fur babies and want to make the most of our years together. Join me as we discuss all sorts of ways to give your dog its best life. We'll cover a bunch of topics: health, training, challenges at different developmental stages, from puppyhood to crossing the Rainbow Bridge, and maybe just a little bit of storytelling centered in how deeply we love these amazing canines. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe. I would love to hear from you in the comments or via email at Jeannine@edupups.com. I'd love to hear topics you feel are important to your life with your pup. Together, we can speak, live, and love dog as we give your dog its best life. A question all of us have is, what do we feed our dogs? Does it really matter? How important is nutrition? When we think about feeding our dogs, there are two main factors: cost and what's in the food. I would have to tell you that I do believe from the research I've done that what is in the food does really matter. There are certain things that you hope to see, and there are certain things that you want to run far away from and not put into your dog. Dog obesity is something which is the greatest cause of a shorter lifespan. So what you feed your dog, you want to make sure that you're packing good nutrients into your pup. I have to put in a plug for buying a dog scale. I found that was one of the best things I could buy, because then I could really monitor my dog's weight and make sure it wasn't just creeping up on me. A lot of times the recommended servings that they tell you to use for your dog are way more than you need, unless your dog is a working or a sporting dog. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of all the basic kinds of food: kibble, canned, homemade, fresh, raw, fresh, mass-produced, and an interesting new product called Unkibble. The first question you have to answer is, do you want to feed your dog grain or grain-free? There's been a lot of buzz in the news about cardiomyopathy, which is heart muscle disease. And I have retrievers. That was one of the breeds that they really watch with grain-free. However, when I looked at the research, it was really interesting. Some of it has been tainted because some of it was sponsored by grain kibble manufacturers. There were other issues too, as far as who was in the study, which dogs were allowed, etc. So you really have to kind of go with what you think feels best to you, and you can talk to your vet, etc. But if you go grain-free, I would try to avoid pea proteins, lentils, and be sure beets, potatoes are not in the first 6 ingredients. They really do think that it's the pea protein that is linked to the cardiomyopathy. Well, we've got to start talking with kibble, because that's obviously the most popular food to feed a dog. I used kibble for years. My father used kibble. That's recommended kibble. It can be the least expensive. There are some pretty pricey kibbles out there now too. But you have to think about, what are you buying? There is some excellent marketing out there. I still remember ads like Kibbles and Bits and Pepperoni. And that was processed and filled with things you wouldn't want to eat you yourself, never mind give it to your dog. The most important thing with kibble is look at the ingredients in the package. Look at the first 6 ingredients. That's the majority of where your food is. That's where the majority that they have. It's most critical. So if you see corn, wheat, soy, rendered fat, or unspecified meat byproducts, I would definitely put it back. Try to avoid artificial preservatives like BHA and BHT, and stay away from artificial colors. Corn syrup is pure sugar. Don't need it. Rendered fat makes me very nervous. It can be toxic and contain mold. It's usually the parts of the meat that should be tossed, and nobody or no animal should eat it. A lot of times you'll see meat meals, beef meal, chicken meal, turkey meal, etc. And those can be nutritious depending on how they were sourced. So you have to know where they came from. Sometimes they're just a catch-all for whatever can't be used elsewhere. Human grade is awesome. If you can find that, great. Whole meat is great. My biggest issue with kibble really is that it's cooked at high temperatures, which can destroy most of the nutrients. And you need to look and be aware of fillers. Some of the kibble, like Hill Science Diet and Royal Canin, are recommended by vets. Sometimes they're because a dog has a medical issue. Sometimes it's breed specific. I've used both with less enthusiasm for the results than I had hoped. If my dog has a medical issue, personally, I would check with a holistic vet, a dog nutritionist, a dog specialist for his or her condition, or contact a large research university like UC Davis or Cornell. Just not a big fan of kibble, even though I used it for a long time. Canned food is seen as more nutritional, less processed than kibble. It has a good shelf life, so it can just be stored somewhere, which is convenient. But again, you have to look at the ingredients. Some of them are very good nutritionally, but also can be super pricey, especially for large dogs. My father used to feed his dogs Elpo. I don't think that even exists anymore. I remember seeing pieces of hooves and tufts of hair in there, and they probably had a decayed meat and all other kinds of stuff. The smell was horrific. Canned food has evolved eons since the 60s. Then there's raw food. Well, there's some real pros to raw food, but I personally don't buy the wolf theory. I don't think that you have to feed your dog like it's a wild wolf. Dogs have been domesticated for over 35,000 years. Raw, though, is very nutritional, and you can't get more natural than raw. If you purchase raw food from a company, it's very expensive. For one dog, I was paying $450 a month. If you make your own raw food, you just need to make sure you're not missing any major vitamins. The other negative for raw food is people can get ill from the raw food handling. Bacteria like E. coli can get on your counter and can make especially kids very sick. Freezing does not kill the bacteria, only cooking it does. Homemade food is something I do love. I did this for a while. There are websites to help you be sure you're meeting all the nutritional requirements. But because I have 4 Goldens, I was like a slave to the kitchen. I was in there for hours, probably every 3 days, and it was just such a huge part of my life. But they loved it. It is something I would explore again if I go down to 2 or 1 dog. I felt really good feeding it to them. It was all human grade. It was just such a nice mix of different proteins with vegetables, some fruits, sometimes grains. I would mix it up all the time. I figured that was also really good to expose the dogs to all different types of meats, vegetables, etc. I definitely, from kibble, saw a huge increase in energy, softer, more luxurious fur, bright eyes. But again, you got to kind of look at your dogs. One of my dogs got gassy from the veggies. One dog seemed almost gluten intolerant. But the good thing is you can adapt it. Mass-produced fresh food, if you don't have the time to cook, which is something I then looked at, I'm like, all right, can I buy it? There are some great companies out there that have really done their homework, and they have a really well-balanced nutritional product. But it's super expensive. I mean, for me, the companies I really liked for 4 Goldens, it would have been about $1,400 a month, and I just can't do that. Plus, you typically would need an extra freezer or refrigerator because the way you would try to keep your costs down is to buy it in bulk. It's just such a tough choice when you want to do what's best for your baby. I found an alternative that I can live with and afford. It's called Unkibble by a company called Spot and Tango. And yes, Spot and Tango also makes fresh food, but again, that option was cost prohibitive for me. Unkibble looks kind of like kibble, but it is all natural, it's human grade, it's cooked at a low temperature to preserve the nutritional value. My dogs love it. They still have those gorgeous coats, that high energy, those bright eyes, and well, knowing me, I supplement with a whole bunch of things, but that's a story for another podcast. Let me tell you just a little bit about Jazz. So Jazz, my oldest dog, who is almost 10, after her last litter, and then she was only 5, was 92 pounds. And she was on a kibble recommended by a vet. It was definitely one of the higher end kibbles. Even walking her at that point 3 miles a day did not touch her weight. We checked her thyroid and it was low normal, so no medication. Then we tried a low-cal kibble recommended by the vet. She lost a few pounds, but she was miserable. She was constantly hungry, and she was not looking happy. Her fur, etc., didn't look great. So I went to raw. I was like, okay, let's try something. We've got to do something for this dog. She's got to lose weight. She then again had a small decrease in her weight, but it was just, like I said, insanely expensive. And I had to be careful of contamination on my counters. I didn't want any of us to get sick. Homemade was what really turned the tide for Jazz, and consistent exercise. This was where the light really went off for her. And again, by using the scale, I could weigh her and then adjust the amount of the whole food I was feeding her. But, oh boy, she was loving that homemade food. Vibrant, happy, healthy. So that was great. But then because I'm still trying to train dogs, I'm trying to write books, I needed to try to get some more time. So I transitioned to half homemade and half Unkibble and kept assessing. That worked for quite a while. Did that for a couple years. I eventually transitioned to all Unkibble. And dogs seem great. Weight is something I have to watch because the amount of Unkibble they said for them to eat, they would definitely gain weight. I began to run with Jazz, and boy, was that a game changer for her. I did also cut the amount of Unkibble to, at one point, it was half of the recommended amount. Then I added either green beans or cooked frozen vegetables. Jazz is now a healthy 68 pounds. She's a happy girl. I'm a happy mama. Now, if she were a perfect weight for her build, probably be 65. She's a pretty large boned female for a golden. But at this point, I'll take 68. There isn't a perfect answer of the perfect food to feed your dog, just like for people. So we do the best we can with the budget we have. Look at your dog. How does your dog act? That's going to be your best way to assess, is the food meeting your dog's nutritional needs? Can a dog live 18 or more years on cheap kibble? Yeah, the answer is yes. Sometimes it's more a question of genetics versus environment. You can do the very best you can, and you just don't know what's actually in those genetic markers. But I am trying to up my odds that my Goldens live more than that average of 10 to 12 years. I'm hoping that Jazz makes it for another 8 or more. So far, she's not just slowing down at all. In my heart, I feel good knowing I'm doing the best I know how. All the pups are healthy. No one's been to the vet for almost 2 years. So I think something I'm doing is working. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Giving Your Dog Its Best Life. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe down below. I welcome your comments here or at Jeannine@edupups.com. Together, we can speak, live, and love dog as we give your dog its best